So recently we went to Africa and we bought a couple of Land Rover Defenders and the comments were absolutely overwhelming. We should have bought a Toyota. So inside this trailer we have the world's most reliable pickup, a 70 series Toyota Land Cruiser. Aaron, can you help me push it out? It doesn't run. Okay, so a little disclaimer before we start. We've done a pile of engine reviews, and these are engines that we've come across in the shop, whether it be me or Scott at Northtown. We'd like to give you all of the points about the engines so you're aware of what you're going into when you buy one of these engines. That's not to say we're harping on these engines, we're not picking on them, but there is no perfect engine. And even though this 1HD-FTE 6-cylinder diesel has been crowned one of Toyota's most reliable, best engines ever, there's still some problems. So we just want to talk about those few little things that you need to be aware of and realize that there is no perfect engine out there yet. Maybe one day. Anyway, let's get into it. This is a guinea pig for another Edison project. We've had a pile of companies that we never thought would reach out to us. In the vocational side, the concrete trucks was a big surprise because they're like, we don't even care what it costs. If we can do a 24-hour pour because of no noise violations in the middle of subdivisions, we'll electrify the whole fleet. And another company that reached out to us is a mining company. And rather than shipping a truck, an old beat up truck out from out west, we found one local and it was cheap because it doesn't run. So this was imported in from Dubai. It doesn't run, but when a diesel is not running, it's just because it's not getting any fuel. So we're gonna swap the battery out real quick. I'm gonna check and make sure we're getting power. Now he said he did swap out a couple pieces. Let's see. This has to be easier to fix than our 99 Land Rover Defender beside a herd of elephants in the middle of nowhere. So let's see if it turns over. First things first, this is so much more comfortable than the Defenders. The seats, I know the seats are aftermarket, so was Barbie though. And I've got all the room in the world. The gauges are in between the steering wheel in front of me. That's pretty wild. And I've got tons of room to drive this thing for days. So I'm not gonna lie, the Land Cruiser is 1,000 times more comfortable than the Defenders ever are. Let's see if the doorpost gets in the way. No, not at all. Anyway, it does not start. So whatever was left was a tiny bit of brake clean they were spraying in just to let me listen to the engine, so it was kind of running on the brake clean. First off, I just want to make sure that I've got power and ground to the shut-off solenoid. So your shut-off solenoid defaults to no fuel, meaning that a plunger's out and it's blocking the fuel from getting to the injection pump. When you give it power, it pulls up on this little plunger generally and allows fuel to go through. When it brakes, it just will not turn on. So with Yoda, we got like this initial little puff of where it would try to start and then shut off. Here we're getting absolutely nothing. So we'll see if we got power there and then go from there. So right now, I'm getting ground on both of these. So looking online, the fuel shut off is still on the top of the engine, but I'm not getting 12 volts there. So I'm just gonna try and hotwire it. If I blow something up, I blow something up. The engine's coming out anyway because we're going to be putting our Cummins in here. But then I thought, you know what, it would be kind of nice to have this engine in one of our Land Rovers. But if I hear a little click here, I think I could make it run. It should have went. So this 1HD-FTE is a 4.2 liter inline six turboed diesel engine. Now for a big engine like this, it's disappointing that the horsepower is only 167 at 3,400 RPM and 280 foot-pounds of torque at 1,400 RPM. But that is exactly why this is one of the best engines, because it's so overbuilt. Now, if it has an intercooler,
they were rated for 202 horsepower. The fuel system is direct injection, but that is one of its flaws because it is electronic. There was a few different versions of engines built to get to this perfect design, and that started with the 1HD is the most comparable to this line. But it was a non-turbo indirect injection with a compression ratio of 22.4 to 1. It's a cast iron block, so super strong. This does not have any electronics in it, so that is more reliable, but it was an extremely heavy engine for 120 horsepower. It weighed 660 pounds. The second version would be the 1HD-T, still the 4.2 liter 12 valve, but now they've added a turbo. Unfortunately, what that means is more pressures on top of the piston, and that led to cracks in the piston crown. So if you left it stock, you were generally okay, but by now people are having fun and tweaking them a little bit, adding a turbo or more fuel, and all of a sudden the internals are not able to handle this anymore, and that led to premature failures. If you would leave the engine alone, it's fine, but it's a little bit of a dog. Now the 1HD-FTE went from 12 valves to 24 valves, and this is when they incorporated still the single overhead cam with the bridge that opened 2 valves at the same time. Still the same bore and stroke and displacement, still weighed about the same, just over 700 pounds. Keep in mind that that is the same numbers that a 12 valve 5.9 Cummins put out in the early 90s. They shaved about 500-600 pounds off the engine and put out the same amount of horsepower. Now it's interesting how Yanmar and Yamaha worked together with Toyota and said, give us that engine, we can get a lot more power out of that from under 200. That means these engines are able to handle this, but now we are starting to get into emissions and they have to detune these engines to meet the regulations set by the outside sources. This used to have a sticker here that says 6, and if you look really close, there was a V there. So somebody's, this was a V6, this is not original at all. We bought it as is, but even still, like, what happened? The brakes didn't disappear after it stopped running. They swapped something. I'm wondering if we should just pop the line off and put our own little electric pump on there. And that might actually do it, as long as we didn't lose those two. Should work. Nope. 100,000 kilometers, which is like 60,000 miles, shouldn't mean a new injection pump. It smells burnt. So when we were talking to people in Africa, they said Defenders and Land Cruiser are basically the exact same, except that everything is one size bigger on the Land Cruisers. So if there's a wheel bearing that's 2 inches, there's 2.5 inches or 3 inches on the Toyota. The shutoff solenoid in Yoda was about that big. On a Land Cruiser, it's a lot bigger. Okay, so pulled the guts out, pulled all the plastic pieces out, blew it clean, brake cleaned it clean. We'll pop it back in. Don't need to give it power. We need a way to shut it off just in case it runs away though. The pump sounds way better. I gotta double check and make sure the fuel is flowing. I took the intake off just in case it runs away, because now I messed with the pump. So I'll grab something that I can block this. That's it. Maybe their diagnosis was right. Their diagnosis was correct in that it does need an injection pump. That's unfortunate because we were hoping to just putt around with this thing for a while before we do all this work to it. Do some dyno numbers and stuff like that. That should be under boost. And yeah, it's not great. But anyway, we don't care because we got a nice rust-free truck. So what we're gonna do is pull this cab right off and start putting the 2.8 in there. Time is of the essence. The faster we can get this done, the faster we can get paid. So here we go. This is a 4.2 liter diesel with a bore of about 3.7 inches and a stroke of 4.01, I think. What that means is that it's an under square engine, which means that the stroke measurement is longer than the diameter of the piston. Now, that's why we're only getting 167 horsepower out of this, but what it sacrifices for power, it makes up for efficiency. If you want big power, you put a bigger surface area on your piston that allows you to put bigger valves in, get more air in, and a bigger surface area for that power stroke to push that piston down. Now, to make up for that, they came up with a single overhead cam with 24 valves. So I compare this engine same as a 24 valve Cummins. They have a nice big heavy block that's able to take a lot of abuse, 4 valves per cylinder to allow as much air in there as possible. But the Achilles heel of that was that the mid 2002 to 2006, I'm thinking, emissions start to play a role in that. All right, so an injection pump is an injection pump, very tight tolerances, and we use the diesel to lubricate that pump. These engines are in modern countries, but they're also in a lot of third world countries. In those third world countries, you don't have the choice of the clean fuel that you do in a more modern country. That means that the pump can physically fail and not be able to pump the fuel because those plungers are scored, but you have the electronic disadvantage on top of that too yet. With the pump being electronic, you need to have a little computer to tell that to do what you want it to do. So now we have inputs going into a computer with outputs going to an injection pump. That means a no start could be one of your inputs, could be your brain, or it could be your injection pump. And to figure out which ones those are, it's extremely difficult. If you have 2 engines side by side and you can swap the sensors and the computer easy enough, you can diagnose that, okay, at least those aren't the problem. If you're on your own, it's very hard to determine whether it's something specific, so you end up buying parts to replace it and crossing your fingers hoping that it works, when in the end it could just be something inside the pump that is not delivering the fuel in the first place. This would be exactly the same as your VP pump on a 24 valve, where you've got mechanical injection, but you have an electronic timing control and a timing advance on it, and that allowed for better emissions coming out of the tailpipe. So this is called a spill valve right here, and that actually monitors how much fuel is getting used. Basically, whatever fuel gets left over on the plunger that's in here is the amount of fuel that gets sent to the pump. That gets inputs like the manifold pressures as to how much fuel gets put into it. Now, because these are usually in abusive situations, meaning dirty conditions, deserts, the first thing that would go on these engines is the timing advance, either through poor maintenance or just poor quality of fuel. But then you've got the electronic aspect on it too, which will leave you by the side of the road. If you have a fully mechanical injection pump, there's a lot less chance of that leaving you as a completely no start and stranded in the middle of nowhere. That is a small downfall, but like any other engine, if you maintain it properly, you will get 1,000,000 miles out of this engine, no problem. When these engines are able to get so many miles out of it, you forget about this one little maintenance thing, and it is a maintenance thing. Behind this plastic cover is a timing belt. In modern engines, we use a lot of timing belts because they're quiet. Oil pumps are going that way now, and timing belts are not uncommon in gasoline engines. Gasoline engines typically let go after 300,000 kilometers. That's the end of it. So you have to do a timing belt maybe 3 times. Not that big of a deal, but this is an interference engine, meaning that the valves occupy the space where the piston does, and it's very crucial that those parts do not touch each other. When your timing belt lets go because of lack of maintenance, the piston will kiss the valves, and it is absolutely catastrophic. So on some engines, I've seen a valve hit a piston and it just bends the connecting rod. There's no connecting rod. There is no sacrificial part in this. This valve is transferring all that energy from the piston into the rocker shaft. And what happens is not only do you damage your valve and a better chance of breaking the valve rather than just bending a push rod, you also break the bridge underneath the rocker. Your camshaft is being held down by a rocker. It's being lubricated by oil because it's going up and down. Now your piston hits that, and because there's no there's nowhere for that to go. It breaks the bridge on your cylinder head. So you've damaged your piston, you've damaged your valve, and you've damaged your entire cylinder head. Now, can I just weld that bridge again? Well, you've got very tight oil clearances there. So the answer is basically no. If you don't get those oil clearances within a thou or two, you either lose oil pressure or you wreck your camshaft next time that you fire this engine up. Now, all of these parts are readily available, but they are extremely expensive from Toyota. I believe the injectors on this, we looked them up, and we are in Canada where things are expensive, but each one of the injectors for this is just under $1,000 Canadian. So you're better to go look for a whole new engine out of something and put the two together than it is to buy a new cylinder head and valves and pistons and start over again. Now on the exhaust side of this, because this was a 2000s baby, we're starting to get more and more stricter rules on the emissions coming out of that. One of those add-ons is an EGR cooler. So you take your exhaust gases out of your exhaust manifold and you reburn those into the intake. That means that there are more components in here. More components means more chance for failure, and you're burning this dirty exhaust gas into your intake again. Now, what a lot of people do, but it is illegal, is just eliminate the EGR. There are no computers or sensors to put you in any sort of limp mode or anything like that. So there is nothing to popping this off and blocking the plate off and ignoring that EGR, but don't do that because that is illegal. After we come out of the turbo here, on the Land Cruisers, there are two tight elbows that really choke off the exhaust as well. We've heard of quite a improvement on efficiency by going to a 3-inch exhaust as soon as you get off of this elbow. But other than that, the engine is extremely robust, is extremely reliable. Maintenance is key, but there are plenty of videos online of no starts, generally from the injection pump, and there's lots of videos on how to rebuild these because a valve kissed a piston. The Land Cruiser is known worldwide as the most reliable pickup truck ever built. Again, nothing's perfect, but Toyota is still making the same Land Cruiser that they have for decades, and we can actually buy a brand new Land Cruiser in Canada, but it comes without an engine, meaning that these engines do not meet the emission requirements for our on-road. But mining companies that use these vehicles specifically off-road are still able to utilize them as rented mules and just beat the living piss out of these things underground in absolutely horrendous conditions. So why did we pull this engine out of our little Land Cruiser? Because this doesn't meet the emissions, it means that it is not good to breathe in and is not ideal for underground situations. We teamed up with a mining company. We are installing a 2.8 Cummins, which is about 500 pounds, and it puts out the exact same horsepower at 165, I believe. That allows us more room under the hood to put a generator, and we will be installing batteries underneath the truck and building electric axles for that truck as a pilot project to see what we are able to do underneath the ground, running on electric, but always having that generator backup to never have to charge this thing by an electrical outlet somewhere staying stationary. So follow along with that project as well. We've already got the entire truck tore apart. We already have the rear axle underneath that truck, utilizing some axles that we bought overseas. While we're waiting for other components to show up, we are building a Dana 44 electric axle for the front, making this still a 4-wheel drive truck. Very exciting to be building one of the world's first hybrid Land Cruisers. So here we go. All right, so as in every video, I get one or two things wrong. We call them Easter eggs, and we need you guys to call me out on it and mark that down in the comments down below. Tell us your experiences. Tell us if I missed something, if I got something incorrect. Let me know. I am not a genius. We just talk about engines that come in through the shop, things that we've come across, and we want to share that with you. So when you get into buying one of these, you know, before you give them $1,000 $5,000 for the engine, make sure you turn it over and check that timing belt. Very, very important. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Check out all the other engine reviews that we did as well. Always read the comments because there's tons of people that are smarter than I am, and we want to learn off of each other. Check out our Facebook group. We've got lots of knowledgeable people there if you have any other questions and you want some live dialogue. But thank you very much for watching, guys. We'll catch you on the next one, and definitely check out the Edison project. Subscribe to Edison Motors, and we're very excited to see what we can do with this Land Cruiser. Here we go.